So here's the problem. It's obvious that many times God is being literal, and sometimes he's not. And could it be just as wrong to force a verse to be literal that wasn't meant to be, as it would be to not take a verse literally when it was supposed to be? Wouldn't it be better to do our best to understand the true meaning of what God's communicating to us? We've seen that not even the flat earth model takes all verses literally. So how do we decide when we do and when we don't? Is that up to our personal choice, or are there rules? To help us think through these things, Kyle and Pat decided to get a hold of Dr. Stephen Boyd. Dr. Boyd has a Master's of Science in Physics from Drexel University. He also has a Master's of Theology in Semitics and Old Testament from Dallas Theological Seminary, and a Doctorate of Philosophy in Hebraic and Cognate Studies from Hebrew Union College. He's currently the Professor of Bible and Theology at Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri.
Dr. Boyd, thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Enjoy being here.
Dr. Boyd, a lot of the people who believe in a flat earth, they start using these verses, but is there some misconceptions going on as far as what the original Hebrew is talking about?
I think you have to be careful to understand what is the genre, what type of literature are you looking at. So, for instance, in Psalm 98:8, it talks about the rivers clapping their hands. Now, the rivers don't clap their hands. This is a type of figurative language. It's metaphorical language. For instance, in Psalm 114, that the land is dancing. You have to interpret things according to the genre, also according to the way in which it was meant to be understood, then it needs to be read that way.
As Dr. Boyd points out, there are different types of writing styles found in the Bible, all inspired. Not all literal, but every one to be taken as God meant them to be. There are historical narratives, like in the creation account of Genesis, or the Exodus from Egypt. There's statutory language, like the giving of the laws. There are lists of generations found in the genealogies. We also read prophecy in Daniel, or poetry, like in the Song of Solomon, both that have very symbolic language. We can often spot these passages by the use of metaphors and the structure and meter of the text. Jesus spoke in parables, and much of the New Testament is written in epistles or letters. Also, phenomenological passages describe things from the viewer's perspective, like the rising and the setting of the sun. So while many say that we take the Bible literally, maybe a better way to phrase it is that we want to understand the true and plain meaning that God communicated to us, regardless of man's opinions. So as we've seen, while many flat earthers claim to take every verse literally, they really don't. And with all of this in mind, let's go back and look at the different components of the flat earth model.
I know one of the other verses that I've seen them using a lot is Isaiah 40:22, where it says that he sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and then they go back and show that that Hebrew word, which I believe is hug, actually means circle and does not mean a sphere. But what would you say to that? How do you answer that verse?
Well, I've got it right here. The one who sits upon the circle of the earth, its inhabitants are like grasshoppers when it extends out like a thin substance, the heavens, and he stretches them out like a tent for dwelling. This is extremely high-level poetry. But it also includes phenomenological language, because if you are out on the water or out on a flat area where there's no trees, the horizon is circular. The big thing about this verse and this whole chapter in Isaiah 40 is talking about the immensity of God and how small we are in comparison.
So like Dr. Boyd has pointed out, Isaiah 40:22 is in a passage that's using metaphorical and phenomenological language to communicate the greatness of God. We can see that when we go back a little further in the passage.
This is a remarkable one in Isaiah 40 verse 12. Who measured in his shoal? The shoal is the palm of the hand. All the water of the earth he can fit in the hollow of his hand. And the heavens, okay, he can measure those in a span. This is a span. So you get this picture of an absolutely immense God, and we are just little beings that he has created.
Isaiah 40 is using poetic language to show that the earth appears to God as a little circle, and the inhabitants as tiny grasshoppers. It's not talking about the literal shape of the earth.
When the Bible talks about the ends of the earth, what does it mean by the ends of the earth? Is it referring to the ends like on a flat earth model?
A lot of things in the scriptures are what we call phenomenological, what it appears to the senses. In this case, what it appears to the eyes. So something that's far away, it looks like it's something that's at the end of something. There's Job 28:24. It refers to the ends of the earth. A couple places it has the idea of a remoteness, like in Isaiah 45:22. And the word for remote is ephis. In Matthew 12:42, peros. And Luke 11:31 refers to the ends of the earth in Greek. It's not referring to the earth having a finite limit.
But there's another verse in Isaiah that's interesting to look at.
Isaiah 11:12, the regathering of Israel from the four wings of the earth. Now, hardly anybody's translating it that way. I don't know why, but that's what the word is. It's kanfot, it's wings. So I don't think that anybody is suggesting on the basis of this that the earth has wings.
When we look at these passages, again we see symbolic wording, not a literal end, which is hard to imagine on a circular disc anyway.
Dr. Boyd, I've noticed that it seems like in Genesis 1, where it's talking about the firmament, that the firmament is actually a dome that's over the earth. So what is the firmament actually? What's Genesis telling us about that?
The verb rakah, which the noun is rakia, for expanse, rakah, it simply means to spread something out. Now, in the derived stem, in the PL stem, it can mean to peen something, to hammer something flat. So I would think the idea of an expanse would be a good translation for that.
So rakia simply means expanse. But using an uncalled for derivation of rakia from the verb rika, which means to pound flat, flat earthers make the case that God formed the firmament out of a hard material, maybe similar to bronze. But again, the actual word rakia used in this passage simply means an expanse.
Now, having said that, the language in Genesis 1 is phenomenological language. What does it appear like to our eyes? Now, there was no human witness for creation, right? There was nobody there. So God is describing things in terms of what it would look like if there was a man standing there and looking at it. So it's this big blue expanse that is overhead and all around you. In Hebrew, shamayim, the word for heaven, shamayim, does not distinguish between the atmosphere, the celestial space, and God's abode. It's all called shamayim. Where God lives is shamayim. Where the stars are, shamayim. Where the birds fly, shamayim. All of that is referred to as the rakia, the expanse.
And that goes for the other concepts as well. In the passage from 1 Chronicles 16 that says the earth shall not be moved, it also mentions that the trees sing out, poetically demonstrating the power and glory of God. The passage about the pillars in 1 Samuel 2 starts off by calling God a rock, using metaphors to communicate the steadfastness of God. The passages about an underworld are taken from symbolic rich passages in Revelation. As we consider the writing style of these passages and the truth of what God is communicating, each concept of the flat earth falls by the wayside.